markets, giving a guarantee of 12 months. And in the end, they also retrain people with coming from, let's say, not easy context. So young people, people from disadvantaged context, so giving them also skills and jobs. That's just to say that exactly the big challenge is to make sure that all this model work for everybody and not just for the lucky ones, as always. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. And indeed, what I learned from your presentation is indeed that yeah, beyond changing the way products are designed and produced so that they can be repaired and remanufactured, etc. That we also need to see the human dimension, let's say, and make sure that we reflect on ways how to connect people with these products, right? And especially those who, yeah, who may have to face more barriers than others. Huh? Maybe one follow-up question, because we mentioned the fact that the Commission published last week a big package with many proposals. I don't know if you have had the chance just to quickly look into this. I'm wondering, what is your first reaction, your first assessment, also taking into account what you emphasized in your own study work. Thank you.
From my perspective, it's really important. I'm so happy that they put the digital product passport in the package, because I think it's the first step to start seeing our product as actually a kind of material of asset management. Very important for people to understand that actually behind every product there's a responsibility. Behind every materials that we own, there's a responsibility, and that's both from the point of view of the people, but also from the point of view of companies, that finally, thanks to the digital product passport, they can start to see the product they put in the market as precious resources they can get back maybe at the end of their life, and also to build also a supply chain on it. So we considering also the scarcity of materials that we are facing, and we are going to face even more, I think it was finally the time for companies and people to understand how in a limited world of resources we cannot afford to lose them and to waste them. Okay, thank you. Still a long way to go, but it will be explained in the second panel, because of course legislators, co-legislators need to look into it, and it needs to be implemented, but good step forward. Next speaker, Chris Bacchus. Chris is a research manager of climate and sustainability at the HIVA Research Institute of the University of Leuven. Chris holds a PhD in social science and master's degree in economics, and the circular economy is really the central topic of Chris's research. He coordinates, amongst many other things, the Michel project on the impact of circular economy on employment in Flanders, has expertise in many things related to circular economy, but also to climate and sustainability transitions. So Chris, you have the floor for about 10 minutes. Thank you.
Look at the audience present here. Thank you very much, Said, for this very kind introduction. Good afternoon to all of you. So the chapter I wrote in the book is about the employment impact of the circular economy. And it's based on actually part of the research that we are conducting in my research group, some of which some of the projects have been mentioned by Said. I will actually skip this one because it has been mentioned 5 times already by other speakers. I think by now you understand that the climate and circular economy transition are highly interlinked. But I will not mention that any longer, and immediately go to the point, which is about we started with the question, if we want to see how many people are working in the circular economy today, how could we measure? And Eurostat actually has an indicator on that, but it's based on actually sector codes, so-called NACE codes, who represent certain activities. Unfortunately, there's some challenges related to this approach, as the NACE codes are not the best way to distinguish the circular economy from other activities. as the circular economy, as you know, is actually kind of a horizontal evolution which should take place in most. But still, there is an indicator, and Eurostat is using it. Thanks very much. So according to the Eurostat indicator, there was like 6% growth between 2011 in terms of circular employment, working in sectors defined as being circular. It's a bit limited because several member states are not reporting on this indicator, which is one of the reasons why we did an additional, more in-depth study, specifically in the Flemish region, Belgium, and where we found that the growth in employment was like 3 times larger, more important than the average growth of the. And fortunately, if we look at some forecasting studies, there we have studies using modeling approaches that are capable of capturing more like intersectoral dynamics, so that we could look at more sectors than just the ones that we see as 100%. This is just one of a few studies that have been published up to now, forecasting the employment impact of the circular economy. And you can see from this graph that first, the impact will be modest. We're talking here about 0.3% employment impact on average, depending on the study, depending on the member states. Secondly, importantly, the impact is expected to be positive. Really obviously important. We see that circular economy will not destroy our jobs, but it's also important to recognize that it will also our economy. Obviously, the macro level data don't tell the whole story, so it's good to have result data. But here we see like a similar conclusions, you could say. For most sectors, we see a positive impact, very small, 0.2. On this graph, the construction sector is a bit of an exception. Negative impact, but it's the sector which is expected to be impacted by the climate transition in a very positive way. So add up the two transitions, the employment impact. So let's have a look now at some of the characteristics of the circular jobs. We have seen in our study that the sectors that we see now as fully circular are really dominated by sectors such as repair and maintenance of cars and machinery, waste sector, recycling, sorting of waste, etc. They mainly attract. Should I keep it? We also see that there are opportunities for low-skilled profiles, so that's also important. It will not worsen the situation of the vulnerable profiles in the labor market. And we also see a very important growth potential for the social economy. Already today, a lot of social economy companies are playing a very active role in circular economy related. In terms of job quality, we should be cautious in the sense that there's not many studies have been done on this issue specifically as of yet. Obviously, we know from some activities that there are risks in terms of quality, health, and safety, etc., mainly in the waste sector, recycling, sorting. We also know that the platform economy, which is obviously not the same as a circular economy, but there are some parallels to be drawn there. But this is also a sector that requires specific attention. And maybe a solution could already be that also these sectors and the logistics sectors that are part of this should maybe take on a more circular perspective and look at their whole value chain, which would include their subcontractors. And in that case, I guess part of this problem would already. Finally, we also see some risks for the global south. It's important to recognize that already our way of producing and consuming goods is imposing a number of problems to developing countries, and many dirty jobs in developing countries are the results of our modes of production and consumption. So this could be further deteriorated, you could say, by the circular economy, but the story is a bit complicated here in the sense that If we say, oh, we will now fully close our borders totally for all types of waste and recycling, then there would be enormous development problems in certain areas. So these people with dirty jobs, it's to take away those dirty jobs, they are often worse off because of very vulnerable financial, social situation. I also, I'm not a great fan, to say the least, of the so-called reshoring of jobs discourse, which you hear claiming by some politicians, is that, oh, circular economy, we will reshore some jobs, get some manufacturing jobs back. Some even frame it as like, we will get our jobs back. So I would really warn against such discourses and really say that the impact on employment will be so limited, it's not worth considering this for employment reasons. So there are a lot of good reasons to pursue circular economy goals, mainly environmental, in the independence of resources, but employment in my an important challenge in the circular economy will be the ability of skilled labor. We see from studies that the skills needed in the circular economy are quite heterogeneous. On the one hand, we have technical skills and crafts that will grow in importance, but on the other hand, there's also horizontal skills, are like integrated perspective on the value chain, more related to collaboration. So we learned from studies that well-trained staff be an accelerator for, but if it's shortage, and we are seeing that already today in several related sectors, then it could even be a barrier or a retardant for the circular economy, and even for the economy. So what will clearly be important, additional training, lifelong learning, the elements to work on, even more than we are. There's really a role for all actors who are involved in either employment or the circular economy. So it's really a multi-actor responsibility. And then to finally, to finish with some policy recommendations. Yes, thank you. My first policy recommendation would be actually to realize the transition. All the studies that I've mentioned, they are all working with scenarios. If the circular economy will be realized, then these are the impacts. But the transition is not realized yet. On the contrary, so we are so enthusiastic about circular economy that I think we sometimes tend to forget that we have not advanced very much. Looking at the studies of circular economy gap, the gap report, etc., it's clear that there's a long way ahead. I already mentioned the importance of vocational training and education. Also the important growth potential for social economy. And here I think a prerequisite or a condition is that both government and economic actors should kind of embrace and accept a larger role for circular economy, which today sometimes there's some frictions and some discussions on the competitiveness or the competition between social economy and regular economy. To me, this is a bit overviewing the opportunities there are in collaborating and using the strengths of both these. And finally, also already mentioned, I think it's important when we establish our or implement our circular economy policies that we also take into account the impact of the global south, that we do not make the situation of some of these countries and workers even harder than it is.
Thank you, Chris. Maybe just one quick follow-up question with regard to the social economy you mentioned just now. Yeah, it's a kind of particular segment in the economy, let's say, often in a public-private partnership context that allows low-skilled people to really gain professional experience, have a decent job. I wonder if you could expand a little bit on how the circular economy can actually promote social economy. What is the growth potential there, and what should we do at maybe European level, national level, regional, local level to support these developments? Thank you.
Okay, thanks for this question. Actually, I would like to reply it by referring to an example that was given by Antonella, the Flemish project, the Papillon project. Yes, I know it quite well. actually there the repair of the machines, so the maintenance and the repair of the washing machines are done not by Bosch themselves, but also by a social economy company. So they are using these skills, and they are, yeah, that's a good example of where these can play a role. I also know several social economy companies that are like exploring to take up more activities related to repair in general, so that consumers can just go to many of them are reuse shops, but they want to extend their activities also to include repair. So you can just take your broken radio to the reuse shop, and then it could be fixed there. So there are a lot of activities that the social economy is actually already good at. And in terms of that, there are often problems with the economic case today. And for the circular economy, sometimes they have a bit more window of opportunity when the business case is not entirely positive yet, to first start there, experimenting, upscaling in the social economy. And then it could lead to either upscaling to the regular economy, or also to different kinds of collaboration between regular economy and social economy, which could also lead both in circular.
Yeah, that's very clear. So, for instance, in the case of Papillon with the washing machines, I assume that Bosch cooperates with, you know, a local partner that's kind of subsidies the project a bit to close the gap and
actually
make it happen.
Obviously, the social economy company is subsidized for the salary cost. That's the model of the social economy. But apart from that, there is no or hardly any subsidies involved. And actually, I heard very recently that Bosch is actually planning to extend that project. Now, 128 washing machines were mentioned. They want to upscale it to 5,000. And they also told me that actually it's a profit-making project for them. So it's not seen as just some charity or just some marketing. It's really a model that they think will be livable and which is already livable today.
All right, thank you, Chris. Let's move now to our two discussants. May I call you so, like that? William Neal and Felix Mailleux. William is advisor on circular economy and green growth at DG Environment in the European Commission. Very much involved in the Sustainable Products Initiative and the Digital Product Passport, but also working on other issues like sustainable finance, taxonomy, etc. Before you served several years in cabinets, including for Commissioners Potočnik and Vella. And interestingly, in a previous life, William, you worked in consumer cooperatives in the UK, and as a Deputy Secretary General of the European Confederation of Workers, Co-ops and Social Enterprises. So I believe that this is a topic that is close to your heart. So William, maybe I would like to ask you to quickly share your views, your feedback on what you heard and on the way forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Said, and congratulations for the publication today. I think it's really extremely timely and very much needed. I know that when, of course, we have to prepare impact assessments for all of our legislative proposals in the Commission. And when it comes to looking at the social and employment impacts of circular proposals, I mean, it's very difficult to find good, very academic work to go on, never mind things which are very policy relevant. I think this is extremely useful. I mean, when we were working on things like the Sustainable Products Initiative, which came out last Wednesday, was adopted by the Commission last Wednesday, intuitively I could feel that there were important labour market impacts potentially. But then when you look at the work that has been done in that area, things like the trinomic study that we saw earlier, on sort of general equilibrium models, they really don't capture the important effects. Tim Gore, in his chapter in the book, I noticed, said that we're rather socially blind in our approach to circular economy. And I think that's maybe going a bit far, but we're certainly sort of holding a candle, I think, in the dark. And I think this is at least a torch to show us the way. And I'm hoping that in the next couple of years, we can sort of find somebody to turn the light on a little bit and enlighten us literally on the social and employment impacts. There are a few interesting bits of work that are starting up. There's the UNEP, United Nations Environment Programme, which has set up a global circular jobs monitor, which has got some very interesting open data on a city basis, looking at the labour market statistics, where you can sort of dip in and see which sectors are most prevalent in which cities. So that's global, but with a focus also on Europe. And then the Club of Rome and Systemic, and actually Laszlo is involved in it as well, are looking at a project over the next couple of years to try and develop a much wider approach to analysing the labour market impact of the climate transition and the analogies with the climate transition, I think, are very interesting, been made by several people, and in the book also by Chris and by Tim Gore and others. I know that, well, going back 10 or 12 years with Dennis Potocznik, it was very intentional that we emulated kind of partnership between climate and energy that was already being established then, sort of the problem and the solution, or the potential solution. And we felt that we had to link DG Environment is doing to what DG Grow is doing. I think what Henning Wilks was saying at the beginning is very true. That needs also to happen at member states level. It's not happening nearly enough yet. There's not enough common ownership of circular economy as an idea. It's developing, but there's more what needs to be done there. Because decoupling resource use is really about industrial policy very much. I think in the package that we adopted last week, we saw at European level, we're extending very much to justice on the consumer side, and of course, gradually going much wider. But I think it is true, the social dimension is still very much missing. It's something which we do need to work a lot more on. Material use has pulled millions of people out of poverty in the last couple of decades, but we still are not managing to sort of pull that. I think when it comes to the climate transition, it has been recognized that it has to be based on principles of social justice. As you move from sort of destructive approaches that we've heard about, some of the examples that were given earlier, as we move from those into the mainstream, we have to think about how that will impact more generally. And we need to carry people with us. I mean, circular economy and sustainability shouldn't be seen as something which is really a luxury. A lot of the examples that we've seen just now are about sharing, they're about getting more value out of things, they're about reducing total life costs, so they should have a social benefit. I tend to think of circular economy in terms of, I mean, Wuppertal has shown very much the flows and stocks of materials moving through the economy. And I see that as a kind of a river. That river is what is driving that sort of 90% biodiversity loss, 50% greenhouse gas emissions. And there are three phases, I think, which are important where we can intervene. Those, I think, are also having different consequences in terms of the labour market impacts and the social impacts. First is when the materials are flowing into the economy. So we talk about resource efficiency, trying to get more added value from those materials as they are converted into products, into other assets. And there is an inbuilt incentive for companies because, of course, productivity, total factor productivity for the bottom line, but it also implies a kind of relative switch between labor productivity and material productivity. I think if you're adding more value to the materials, you know, generally you would hope that you're using more labor to do that. And I think you said in your chapter, you know, that circular jobs tend to be more labor intensive, and that is perhaps one of the reasons. Second is the sort of recycling. So if you can loop those materials back into the economy, and here we see really the more maintain the value of those materials as they are looped back, the more jobs you create as well. There's a study that we quote in our package, or at least in the website that presents our package, done by Gaia, which shows that if you recycle 10,000 tons of waste based on I think examples, you create about 115 jobs. If you landfill or incinerate that waste, you generate 2 jobs. So really keeping more value in the recycling, creating more jobs. But the most important part of that flow is the bit in between. We talk about linear being make, take, dispose, make, dispose. We want to sort of have take, make, use, reuse, repair, reuse, then dispose. And it's about lengthening the time in which you keep those materials in use, functional use in the economy and providing well-being. And this is very much what the eco-design for sustainable products regulation is intended to do. And I'm sure in the next session with my colleague Helena, you'll go into that in more detail. But I think that it is very important for consumers. It's very, very important for local jobs. I agree with what Chris was saying, that we should be careful about talking about reshoring jobs. But you also note in your chapter that a lot of the benefits of circular jobs in terms of employment are coming to the high consumption countries, the richer countries. Europe happens to be one of those. To wrap up on a couple of things, I've got a lot more notes here. I was reading the book last night, and I was finding it extremely stimulating. Just to say, the package that was adopted last week is of course, or the eco-design part of it is very important, because it's at that beginning of the phase, so it really determines so much of length to which durability of a product, the length lasts for in the economy, but also the intensity of use, a lot of the business models that are linked to that. But we are very much looking at systemic approaches. We adopted the textile strategy also last week. We're looking at the key value chains. We're looking at other tools. As you mentioned, I've been involved in the taxonomy. And I think it would be very interesting, actually, when we're talking about skills for circular economy. In the taxonomy, the Sustainable Finance Platform last week adopted and published its approach to the Taxo 4, so including what the technical screening criteria which would establish what is a substantial contribution to circular economy in different economic sectors. Now, on the basis of that, I think it would be very interesting to look at what are the skills which are required to meet those substantial contribution criteria. And I think it'd be very interesting moving forward to suggest that we do a bit of work in that direction. I'll stop there. I'm very happy to go into more depth on social economy and circular economy.
Great, thank you, William.
Where the time is moving.
Indeed, and maybe we can come back later during the Q&A on the taxonomy, because in parallel to the 4 additional environmental criteria that were discussed last week, there is also the social taxonomy. So maybe this can be linked together, but that's another debate. But let me move to Felix, Felix Maillot. First of all, thank you for chipping in so late. I mean, you were asked yesterday evening, I think, whether you could join us today, and very kind of you to do so. You are the advisor on climate, energy, and industrial policies at the European Trade Union Confederation, the organization that represents the workers across Europe. And prior to ETUC, you worked for 4 years as an energy policy specialist for the EU Trade Association. Felix, I don't know if you have had the chance yesterday evening, very late, or this morning to read the book, but I'm pretty sure that you're very familiar with the circular economy and what's going on in the EU these days. And I wonder if you could give us some feedback on what you heard and what you believe is crucial to make it a successful endeavor. You have the floor. Thank you.
Thanks very much, and good afternoon, everyone. I did not have the chance to read the whole book, but I did read the 2 employment and social dimension, and I will read the rest of the book. Interesting, and congratulate the authors. From my side, I'm very thankful to be here today and because last year the ET, together with the EU, conducted a study to evaluate the impact of the shift. So very much in line with the work. And as part of this study, we tried to look at the impact on employment, changing job and tasks, on the training needs, and on the working conditions. And I'm very glad to have seen this. This works better? Yeah. No problem. I'm very glad to have read these chapter, because many of your conclusion goes in the same direction as ours, and I will touch upon this later. From my side, I think historically the debate or the discussion around circular economy have been very technical, with a lot of data or a lot of scientific information that is very hard to process for normal people and workers and trade union, to be honest. And I think that bringing the social dimension and bringing this social dimension in the debate is very crucial for us as well to get involved, and for the people on the ground of company level to get involved as well. So that's one of the points I want to insist. And therefore, it also means that our institution, the EU, also needs to invest sufficient money to make studies about the social impact about this, and not only on the environmental aspects of the things. I want to go back a little bit to what you highlighted in your presentation, to compare a little bit with what we had in our study. So on the overall impact on employment, we had the same figure, I think, from the rare studies that exist. But in terms of sectors, we identified that the waste management, repair, maintenance, recycling, and remanufacturing would be the one benefiting the most, while extractive industries, primary basic materials, some durable goods as well would be negatively impacted. But for construction, textiles, we had a little bit of a blurry zone. We didn't know, because it depends a lot on the business model and that kind of elements. Just to say from my trade union background that those extractive industries are usually very highly unionized, and therefore there is a challenge to also unionize the other sectors that will appear, which is not the case at the moment. And a high unionization is also a way to secure good wages, good working conditions, etc. And therefore, perhaps there is a place for some policies there. On the qualification and skills, we saw in our study that circular economy tends to require higher skills for workers, because they need to adapt more to different types of materials, etc. And we see also that it should increase the demand in mid-level qualifications, which may be a good news in the actual dualization of the labor market. So it may be a good way to continue building a middle class as well. On the impact of the circular economy on the forms and organization of work, one aspect that I didn't see reflected in the chapter is that from our affiliates, we heard that they are worried the shift to circular economy could change the applicability of some collective agreements. So it means if the tasks of the company change, maybe workers that were covered before by collective agreement will not be covered after. And this is a point of concern for us as trade union. Another point of concern, but you mentioned it, is sometimes the association, not always, but of the sharing economy business model, which are related to platform and with bad conditions of work. And also the fact that it's a lot of the time startups that are also active in circular economy aspects. And very often there is no proper trade union representation in startup. Yeah. I just look at my note. Yeah, maybe I would like to conclude on one aspect. And sorry, I didn't prepare a presentation, but I brought a photo here. It's from people working in waste management sector. And maybe you can make it pass through the audience. Sorry for the people online. But I think this is what is happening at the moment in the waste management sector for these workers. And you can see from this picture the very bad working conditions there. Now, circular economy can actually take two directions. Either we tackle this challenge and circular economy can be a good way to improve the condition of those workers through better production processes, etc. Or we simply do not tackle this challenge, and then the shift to circular economy will create even more working conditions like that. So that's a call from our side to take into account circular economy. One last point on the proposal from the Commission, the first package.
we very much welcome the ambition and the objective, but we don't see reflected this social dimension. And the role of social dialogue and collective bargaining and trade union is not reflected in the proposal. So we would like to explore maybe these ways. But thanks a lot.
Great, thank you very much, Felix. And now we have our Q&A, I understand. I don't know if there are questions in the room or otherwise online. I see there were 21 comments in the chat, maybe all about the noise or the... Kevin. Wait, you need to take a micro because otherwise nobody will hear you. All right. Here you go.
Okay, so the question was, why not consider social and due diligence criteria in the list for sustainable products? Why not refer to those through product passports?
All right, maybe it's a question to William. I mean, you know, there is a proposal on the table, right? And it's going through a legislative process, so it may happen at some point later in the parliament or in the council. But William, what is your, I mean, first of all, what is said about it in the current proposal, and what do you think could be added in response to the question?
Thank you for the question. It's one which we were posing internally a lot in the development of the proposal, and in the end, we felt that it was very difficult to articulate the products initiative with the corporate sustainability directive and other aspects, which would mean, I think, that approach that we would propose would be likely to have significant costs with very dubious benefits, and I think that more on in the future is actually trying to link up and articulate those different aspects going forward. I would say that, I mean, the digital product passport, which you were very happy with, and thank you for those comments. The digital product passport will enable far more information to transfer, allow transparency along, and although we are really legislating for data access requirements through the sort of eco-design process, those will be based on what are sort of public interest objectives and environmental objectives, and things which might not be shared openly by voluntary passports. There are many voluntary passports already existing which are sharing information on things like due diligence in respect of working conditions and so on. And I think that actually the fact that we will be developing standards and regulating for the actual tags and identifiers, the standards for sort of interoperability and sharing for the digital product passport will mean that a lot of voluntary initiatives will also be helped along the way. So I do think that we will have a positive impact on sharing of those kind of social data.
All right, good. Kevin, more questions online or here in the room? Yes, I see one hand there. Please introduce yourself and quickly ask your question, please. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. So Timo Kahl from the Friedrich Ebert Stiftung, from the new founded Competence Center, Social and Climate Justice. One question regarding this big topic, circular economy, connected to the also big topic of the e-car industry, battery cars. So I know that solutions and discussion, they are just evolving and there's a lot of development, but the big companies already jumped on some processes to come to a broader use of circular economy regarding the batteries. How do you maybe a question to Felix, but maybe also to the other authors. How do we evaluate the strategies from the companies till now out of the perspective good jobs?
Right, very big question. Maybe indeed, Felix, you can start, and if anybody, Antonella or Chris, want to complement, you're welcome. Chris.
Thanks. Excellent question. I think that's exactly why we are calling to make use actually of the trade union representative, the Works Council, the Health and Safety Council within the companies. By the way, there are also European Works Council for those automotive companies that are among different countries. And what we would like to see is to make real use of social dialogue and collective bargaining to develop just transition plans in those companies to make the shift to circular economy. So it means, okay, the company make a proposal on a way to change the production to move towards a more circular business model. But then in those discussions with the trade unions, the impact on employment, on working condition, on skills of the workers is discussed, evaluated, and there is a training plan, an investment plan, and that kind of elements. It has been done for car companies in the context of decarbonization. I think it was by Daimler in Germany. There are some cases of collective agreements on that, and it was very interesting. But we know that Germany has a strong tradition of social dialogue, and it's not the case in other EU countries. And that's why we think really this thinking about the governance in the circular economy could be very much interesting. And you mentioned before the different coordination between the different DGs, but I think involving DG Ample could actually bring a lot of new elements and potential improvement in the governance.
Yeah, thank you. And maybe given the links with climate, obviously it can also be addressed through other initiatives that are being implemented, right? I mean, one of the ideas within the reform of the ETS would be to develop also social climate plans and to use the social climate fund, all kind of initiatives in order to reduce the emissions. Maybe that's also an avenue where that allows to link it also with the circular economy. And I agree that some of this needs to be addressed, let's say, within the companies. But as was mentioned before, you also need a lot of cooperation, you know, between companies or between a company and regional authorities or social economy partners, etc. So it's a kind of multi-stakeholder effort that somehow needs to be addressed. And therefore, I think maybe this kind of regional plans, social climate plans, for instance, could be a way forward. I don't know, Chris or Antonella, anything to add to this? Not for the time being. All right, more questions. I see Andreas. Take a mic, please.
Perhaps a question to Chris and Antonella, because you kind of come from the research side, and I think both of you said that in terms of data, there is not much out there on what are the skills needed, what does that mean in terms of the employment and business relationships, the transition to a circular economy. Why would you say is this the case? Is this a method issue or a data issue or an interest question? So I think I would be very interested in knowing how would you research this? How can such research be supported? And if, for example, so to speak, if there is new investment, for example, with the recovery plans, would this be, could we look at, for example, how this relates to circular economy if we have kind of new sectors emerging, new policies, just a little bit for me to understand where the research is standing right now on those topics.
Yes, thanks. Very good question. Yeah, I think it's a bit a mix of all these problems and challenges that you were mentioning. I think data is lacking, but obviously when we talk about skills, this is it's not a quantitative issue. It's not like number of people working for a sector. So there we see that it's a lot more challenging. On top of that, you have the phenomenon that the studies that have been done on the topic lead to the conclusion that there's like kind of heterogeneous skills that will be needed in the circular economy, and some higher profiles, but also some lower and some middle. So it's not like a very clear-cut answer that we are getting from it. Personally, I also think that it's harder to like model and study the circular economy than climate transition, for instance. Climate transition, you have you have the CO2 and CO2 equivalent, etc. But in the circular economy transition, if you get also the policies, it's much more watered down and dispersed all over all kinds of smaller policies. You could say we do not have an ETS for the circular economy. One example, which makes it also harder to do studies on the impacts of all these policies. So I think that's several reasons why it's more complicated to study also the employment impacts of the circular economy than is the case for the climate transition. So there's a lot of challenges still remaining, and yeah, it will take a lot of more time, I'm afraid, to give more conclusive answers.
Yeah, I was more focusing on the social piece, and I would say that there the data are missing. The data is missing, mostly because of until now lack of attention, and also because honestly, the latest COVID crisis, in my personal experience, I was not able to interview the people participating in the Papillon project just because they were not really in the condition to be reached out. At the same time, though, I was able to speak with the participants of a similar project that was run in the Netherlands for 7 years. It was not aiming completely to people living in poverty, but with people with low income and living in a social housing, social housing. And so the data in that case now is there, but the result is that at the end, people and family environmental awareness is totally connected with their economical situation, their economical finance. That's a really crucial element that we need to challenge and to face when we are discussing about policy in the circular economy.
Thank you. Maybe Ilaria, one additional follow-up on let's say policy recommendations from your experience, etc. Are there things that should be done, let's say, to improve accessibility, affordability of circular economy products and services? And looking at what the Commission has proposed just last week and what is in the pipeline, do you think we are on the right track? Does it have to happen at the EU level, or is there more room for maneuver at national, regional, local level? Happy to hear your views on this.
In ideal world, I would like to see more companies actually deciding to give up a bit of profit. But in the end, I know that it's the policy and the European level that highly has to strongly push in that direction. If I think, for example, about the fashion and the textile piece that's in the proposed package, I'm really happy to see there's a push towards fast fashion and there's a push in for reuse and repair services. But once again, I see that there's again a challenge how to get to the people that at the moment are mostly going for fast fashion, not going for high-end quality garments. So for me, we should on one side push on the awareness from companies, awareness from people on the material use and material consumption. But at the same time, I would think to finance and to invest more in rental services and in leasing product, because I think that's the way you can give people with low income access to high quality without ownership. And that giving high quality access to high quality product, in the end, it's also giving access to high efficient and energy efficient product, and so better also for the environment piece in the end.
Okay, thank you. But I assume the threshold needs to be low, right? For those people to, just find out, and it needs to be close to where they live, and the barriers needs to be addressed. I mean, it's not just about offering these type of things.
In urban areas and not urban areas, it's also challenging geographic to offer this kind of services and schemes.
All right, thank you for this. Kevin, you have another question, I believe.
So we have another question from Zoom by Eduardo Rodriguez. He asks, who do you think should bear the responsibility of helping workers achieve the general upskilling and work transition that will be required for circular economy to work properly?
All right, who should be in charge? Everybody, maybe.
I think it's definitely a joint responsibility. The employers, of course, if they want their business model to succeed, they have a responsibility also to train their employees. The public authorities also to some extent, because public policies need to incentivize for those skills. And finally, the trade unions also have a responsibility and are ready to take that responsibility, but they need to be given the right structures and the right institutions to be able to take part in this.
I can complement a little bit, and I can also reply to your call for us to be more in touch with colleagues in DG Employment, because I can say that we are cooperating with colleagues in DG Employment, particularly on the social economy, circular economy side. I mean, we've been inputting into the social economy action plan also, but particularly on skills needs for green transition, where with CEDEFOP and with DG Employment, there's a lot of work going on now, and we're certainly very much involved in that and in developing those skills. And I think that, I mean, as we see circular economy going from the kind of niche and disruptive circular business models to the mainstream, we can't just tell businesses that they have to go circular. I mean, so what does that mean? You know, I mean, it's not on most businesses' radar, particularly small businesses. I think one of the challenges that we have is to take the best models that are out there and be able to advise businesses in a very tailored way of what is most appropriate for their particular situation. And two next door businesses in the same sector, same size, might have, you know, it might be suitable for one, not for the other. So we need to work on a way in which we can deliver that. And this is the thinking behind the Circular Business Hub, which we've announced also, which we will be developing going forward. That was also announced last week. And on the social economy side, I think that it's the suitability of social economy enterprises for circularity is certainly there. I mean, partly because I mean, there are three facets, I guess, of social enterprise which are important for circularity. One is the idea of sharing, and the idea that your dividends aren't based on capital, they're based on throughput through the enterprise, which I think can be easily applied to many circular business models. The second one would be the sort of the importance of community and proximity and trust, which I think is also very important for many circular businesses, which often need to be very locally anchored. And the third is the fact that many of them are, as was said earlier, very involved in inclusion and employing excluded and vulnerable people. And they are able to experiment before a lot of classical businesses, because they don't have that need to pay shareholders as their overriding objective. So they're really companies that are based on utility and not necessarily shareholder returns.
Thank you. Chris, do you want to add anything on skills?
Sure, thank you. I think looking at training and skills development based on the research we did and doing the interviews we did with both companies and employees, etc. I think all these actors are kind of stalling, and they're all looking at each other to play a larger role than they do today. But I think a bit more introspection is needed on both sides, and to think about the way they should themselves contribute more to these upskilling challenges. In Belgium, for instance, lifelong learning, which is a key condition to meet these challenges related to skills development, is really not part of our culture, and employees are too reluctant to take part in trainings. Obviously, the culture and the institutional background should be there, but still, and on the employer side and company side, companies today are still expecting too much or too often that people coming in their company are already fully skilled. They need to realize that they need more to put more effort into this on the job training, etc. Because the people will not be fully skilled in the future when they enter the company. So more action is needed there. And I think one positive example I saw is a kind of a collaboration, I mentioned it before, between social economy companies and regular economy companies. The regular economy companies are not finding their staff, skilled or not skilled, they're just not finding them for repair, for instance, of electrical devices. And then now they collaborate with social economy companies who are used to training a lot of people coming in with low skills at the beginning, receiving specific trainings in electricity and like low level type of repair skills. And in the end, these people can grow out to then, after their training in the social economy company, work for some time there, and then immediately move on to the regular economy company. They have a collaboration agreement. So this could be a win-win situation, but it requires some preparedness to change and to think about ways that they could.
Thank you, Chris. I have one follow-up question on this. I mean, we're always speaking about lower skilled people. However, designing products, thinking about new business models requires also engineers and designers to be aware of the potential of a circular economy. So it means that in our business schools, in our education system, at universities, etc., I mean, we need to educate, let's say, future business leaders and trade unionists also to be aware of that. So I'm wondering if you have came across some research on this, or have you any ideas you want to share on this, Chris?
Yeah, maybe we haven't done any specific studies on these profiles, but it's clear that the demand for these skills will also grow, not only because of the circular economy transition, but because of the other mega trends, you could say, with an impact on the labor market, digitization, the climate transition as well. So all these mega trends actually all increase the need for high level, mainly technical skills. So you could say there's a lot of competition already today, and it will get worse future for sure. So yeah, again, I think it's a joint effort. I think our universities and business schools are quite good already, but they need to train more people, and that's not only up to them to, you know, to incentivize people to choose STEM directions, etc. So it's really a joint effort of government, of regular education, vocational education, training. Trade unions could play a role in it. So it's a joint effort, and it sounds maybe general, but yeah, that's.
Thank you, Chris. I think we still have 5 minutes, right? So there is maybe one more question that we can try to answer. Kevin.
So my question is for Antonella, and it's how do you have any propositions to incentivize people who can't afford the circular economy products? For example, when they have to go in and repair a jumper, but it costs more than buying a new jumper. Do you have a short-term solution for that? So before we can make it affordable, like, do you have any strategies for kind of going through that first step?
Honestly, easy solution, no, because yeah, with the people I talked with for the Dutch project I was mentioning before, in the end, the key element they were always coming back was the economical piece. And so while on the side of the companies, Bosch and Turn2, and in that case was Hegenaar, that's like the social house company in the Netherlands, they were pushing on the social piece and the environmental piece. For the tenants joining the project, the only key element there was actually the economic piece. So easy solution, not. Raising awareness and trying to show how in the long term, reusing, repairing rental schemes, they can basically, in the life cycle of product, make more economical sense. That's the only way to go. But I understand that from a certain perspective, also giving up ownership, it's quite
a strong factor. It's quite a barrier that they feel they can almost not afford something like that. And that's also a question of pride at some point, coming from a specific social context.
Thank you. Anybody else on this? Yeah.
Just to say also that there are quite a few good examples of reduced VAT for those kinds of services for repair and so on, which obviously are member states issue. But for example, the most quoted one is in Sweden for repair services. And I think that's a very good way of incentivizing.
Thank you. I think we're running out of time unless there is a kind of very important last question. If not, I would like to ask the members of the panel if they want to share a very last 30-second message. That would be a pleasure. Yeah.
Maybe I could say one. We're talking a lot about possibilities for poor people to actually take part in circular economy. I think 2 or 3 generations ago, people were actually, the circular economy was the only model they could afford. They were repairing everything, reusing everything, extending the life cycle of everything, even much beyond the point that you say it's sensible. But the things have changed because now the economy has moved into the linear model, and now it's not the most affordable way to go anymore. So I do think that in terms of changing relative prices, that's an important way to go forward. And then VAT is one, but that's not very targeted for vulnerable people. So there are other ways, and obviously stronger poverty policies is also part of it. So maybe we should look back to the way our grandparents used.
That's a nice closure. Yes. Okay. Well, thank you very much for your contributions and for the questions. I think it was very interesting indeed. Andreas, I believe that we have now a little break. That's how much? 15 minutes. So for those online, see you in 15 minutes. And for the others, I think you're invited to have a coffee and exchange views with your neighbors and with us. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Okay, welcome back everybody, both online and here in the room. So now after we've heard about, from a research perspective, from our book, on what the social dimension of the circular economy is, what is missing, where is missing data, what are good initiatives. We already kind of touched quite a lot, and it was kind of foreshadowed, the big circular economy package that was published by the European Commission last week. And now in this panel, we're going to go with a deep dive into the files that actually have been proposed and into the ideas that have been developed at the European Union level to step up the game of the circular economy, including the social dimension, but also kind of amplifying the scope of the circular economy. And for this, I would like to give the floor first to Helena Braun, who happily has agreed to join us. She's a member of the cabinet of Franz Timmermans, the executive vice president of the European Commission, who leads the work on the Green Deal. Under the Green Deal, Helena is responsible for the circular economy agenda, which is very topical given our conference here, including sustainable products policy and the EU textiles strategy. And she's also responsible for the biodiversity agenda and the chemicals policy. And before that, Helena was a sustainable development advisor of Mr. Timmermans in the previous commission, and she had also held various posts in the Estonian government. Now, as up for our discussions, we're going to start with Stefan Arditi, who works as a director for the policy integration and circular economy at the European Environmental Bureau, a federation of 160 environmental NGOs from across Europe. And Stefan has also a background as being a quality lean consultant in the automotive and aeronautics industry in France and the UK, and has a background in philosophy and environmental management, which brings many things that we're discussing here close together. Then we have Ilaria, who is also another author from our book, Ilaria Nicoletta Brambilla, who is a cultural and cognitive geographer, and who has written also a book which is called What is a Circular Economy, which is a question we are still debating very much today. So I'm also looking forward to your intervention. And finally, Yanis Brizga, who is one of our editors, alongside with Said El-Kadrawi, will also give some comments on and his reflections on current EU circular economy policy. And Yanis, apart from being a co-editor of the book, is the head of the board of the NGO Green Liberty and a researcher at the University of Latvia. And he has a background, PhD in geography and earth sciences with a focus on environmental science. And he also has worked, was the chair of the Northern Alliance for Sustainability and the Environment Policy Program Director at the WWF Latvia. So it's quite a distinguished panel, quite a lot of very heavy hitter expertise. And we're gonna kickstart here by learning a lot more about the files of this recently published Circular Economy package by Helena Brown. And I'm gonna give you the floor.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon to everyone. It's really a great pleasure to be here to introduce. Everything good? And please do tell me if the microphone is not working well. So yes, it's a great pleasure to introduce you to let's say the flagship package that we presented last week at the European Commission, the flagship package of our Circular Economy Action Plan. I would first of all like to really congratulate you for this, for the publication of this book. It's clear that it has been a result of a huge effort, and there are really quite many inspiring ideas, but also very concrete proposals for policymakers for moving ahead with the advancing of circular economy. And they are important in the context of today's package, but there are many other proposals from the European Commission still coming, and also a lot of inspiration from the book. But when we at the European Commission announced this package in 2020, we lived in a rather different world. It was before the COVID crisis, and it was also before the ruthless invasion by Russia of Ukraine. So yes, the situation was pretty different, but what we see today is that those crises combined with the worsening planetary crisis of climate change and biodiversity loss, they have actually only further underlined how urgent it is to rethink our economic model, including our product policy, and to in particular address our excessive dependencies on primary natural resources. What I understood has been emphasized already 5 times today is this figure of 90% of biodiversity loss and half of global greenhouse gas emissions coming from resource extraction and processing. Of course, this is, let's say, the underlying factor which drives us and has been driving us for advancing the circular economy. Is now. But what we also see very clearly in the current crisis is that this dependence of ours on primary natural resources, including, of course, fossil fuel imports, it makes us very vulnerable. It makes us very vulnerable in terms of the prices for people, supply shocks for businesses, and also the overall resilience of our economies and the single market. And having a new approach to the way we design, make, and use products is an integral part of the economic shift that we need. It is also a very important part of the EU's urgent energy transition agenda. If we look at the current EU rules on eco-design, we do see that, no, please, it's still the first slide. Even go back. So yes, it's just a bit to give a bit of introduction and context of where we are coming from, and also putting it really in the context of today's urgencies. What we have seen from the current eco-design rules already is that we have really managed to have very notable reduction of energy consumption and dependence on fossil fuels. We have seen a 10% lower annual energy consumption by the products that are in the scope of today's eco-design framework. This is comparable to annual energy consumption of a country like Poland, for example, or 11 smaller EU member states. And when we talk about the benefits for consumers, we see that, for example, in 2021 alone from the existing requirements, we have saved consumers around 120 billion euros, even when we take into account the, say, the acquisition costs of a specific product. And then in the Circular Economy Action Plan in 2020, we did not only commit to, let's say, accelerating of the existing eco-design directive, but we also committed to creating a new framework that would allow us to make environmentally sustainable products the norm in the EU, going beyond energy-related products. And next to that, we also committed to boosting circular business models, which are also a very interesting part of the publication, and empower consumers for the green transition. So this package that we presented last week, basically, it is not entirely complete, but it does include the main legislative and several other policy proposals for us to be able to make that actually happen in the EU. Now we can move to the first slide. So at the very core of the package is the proposal for the regulation for eco-design for sustainable products that was also mentioned during the earlier panel. With this proposal, we are extending the scope of the existing eco-design framework to cover basically the broadest possible range of products. Only very few categories are exempted from the regulation. And well, it is basically to allow us to design more sustainable, circular, energy efficient products through those mandatory eco-design requirements. And I will mention a bit more about the mandatory eco-design requirements in a moment, but a couple of other elements that the regulation introduces, it will enable us also to put an end to the destruction of unsold consumer goods. It will be done also via delegated acts that will be used for the implementation of this regulation, but already as a first step, once the co-legislators agree on the proposal, first step is already that bigger businesses who do discard unsold products, that they will have to disclose how many of those products they discard per year, provide reasons for that, and also show how much of those products they actually send for reuse, how many for remanufacturing, recycling, energy recovery, and also landfill, to understand how those products are treated in line with the waste hierarchy. Also, the information element is very important of this regulation. We do want to make sure that consumers, but also businesses, as well as public authorities in member states, can have the right information about the environmental sustainability of products. And that is why the digital product passports that were mentioned will be mandatory as per our proposal. But as I mentioned, I mean, we do not plan to, let's say, stop until the new framework is adopted and enters into force. And that is why until then, we really want to strengthen, let's say, the implementation of the existing eco-design framework. That is why together with the proposals, we also presented a new eco-design and energy labeling working plan for the until 2020, where we have new important energy-related products covered. And already today's eco-design directive, it does give us the possibility to regulate for those energy-related products, also circularity elements. So this is also something that we want to step up, tablets, phones, and so on, that also their durability, recyclability. Now we can move to the next slide, because before going to the other elements of this package, I just wanted to touch for a moment upon those eco-design requirements themselves, because these are really, let's say, the core bullets of what the future framework will cover. So basically, if the proposal is is accepted by the co-legislators, we would have the possibility to set those mandatory design requirements, which would be both performance requirements and information requirements on those different elements that you see on the screen. So I will not list them all, but was the repairability that we have discussed or heard about a lot today, the durability, recycled content in products, possibility to recover materials, the remanufacturing elements, and also overall environmental impacts, including carbon and environmental footprints. And this in the future will translate, yes, if we take the example of recycled content, it's taking textiles, it's, well, a minimum mandatory recycled content that an X product category would have to comply with in order to be allowed on the EU market, for example. And the information requirements would then mean that it is information maybe about the same element that you see on the screen, or about any of the other elements. They do not have to go hand in hand always necessarily, and it may not be say justified to put for all product categories on all those elements, both performance and information requirements. But this is kind of the core that that will be worked on. So one of the questions that we have been asked, and that is very important, is how will those, let's say, existing pieces of EU sectoral legislation relate to the new regulation that we are proposing? Of course, the coherence between that and the other sectoral rules that we already have in place, it is very important and has been also carefully considered when this package has been made. We have in the EU, well, you may be aware of the chemicals legislation or packaging or batteries. So we need to, let's say, understand clearly how those different things will interlink with each other. Basically, there are two key categories that can be, let's say, differentiated from each other. So for those product categories where today we do not have a dedicated legal framework at the EU level, we will use this new eco-design regulation to set requirements on those elements that I mentioned earlier. And the first example of that is textiles. It is the fourth highest contributor to the greenhouse gas emissions and also the user of primary raw materials. And why we presented the EU strategy for sustainable and circular textiles together with the package is that they are, well, fully interlinked. Textiles will definitely be one of the, let's say, the first product groups that we will regulate under the new eco-design framework. And in the strategy itself, we are describing a bit more clearly the political intention behind it, how we plan to do that. But then for those product categories that already have their own dedicated legislative instrument that also covers sustainability, eco-design regulation, it would not intervene in principle unless we find it also through our individual impact assessments that it's necessary, that it's justified, and then it would, there is the possibility to add or use also the eco-design regulation to set some complementary, say, norms for those categories. And we are mentioning also in the documents the communication which explains a bit the package as a whole. Some sectors, so for example, construction products, extremely important sector with very high environmental and climate footprint, but also with very high circularity potential. There we have a construction products regulation at the EU level. We are revising it. It was also part of last week's package. And it's one of those examples where in principle, the new regulation would not intervene. Another very high impact sector, packaging. We are currently working, and this is foreseen for the second half of this year, on the revision of the EU's packaging and packaging waste directive to align it again with those same, let's say, sustainable product principles. But also here the packaging, let's say, framework will be the key one. And third one that we mentioned, for example, is batteries. Well, and cannot overemphasize the importance, of course, especially in today's context. And also here, we only recently presented a new regulation proposal for a European regulation on batteries. So this would, for example, for that sector serve as the main vehicle regulating the sustainability of this product category. Move to the next slide. I think it's quite important because it's not part of the legislative, say, proposal itself, but we did commit in the circular economy action plan to advance and boost the circular business models, which are, yes, an interesting part of the publication. We do realize that, let's say, next to making products themselves, their physical characteristics, the way they are produced, environmentally sustainable, we also need to increase the overall, let's say, demand for circular business models, because this is what really can help us reduce the demand for energy and resources, and help us realize this vision of decoupling economic development, economic growth from primary resource use. And we do not have at the EU level necessarily yet the best legislative, let's say, vehicles. We are, well, this is our what we are good at, normally proposing legislation. We do not have very good possibilities for that for circular business models today. Of course, the eco-design directive regulation, if it will be yes, accepted, will already provide good possibilities for that. But in addition, we find it quite important to bring businesses and other stakeholders together in what my colleague William mentioned earlier, the circular business hub, to really start engaging with the different parts of society and different parts of business community, how to ensure that those business models are increasingly attractive to consumers, that they are also, yes, picked up by the business community increasingly. And in addition to that, as I mentioned at the beginning, and as we committed in the Circular Economy Action Plan, we have to make sure that consumers are willing to, and of course can come along with this transition. What we see today is that consumers often not have any choice but to accept short-lived products that cannot be repaired. There is lack of information, and what we also see an increasing, seriously increasing trend of greenwashing. So today, together with the package of last week, tabled the legislative proposal to empower consumers in the green transition. And also this year, there will be several other initiatives still presented, specific dedicated green claims, and also a specific right to repair initiative, create that right consumers. Of course, as it is with every single, let's say, part of the Green Deal, we do want to work very closely with our global partners. We realize that this is not a transition that the EU can do alone. We hope to inspire the world to follow, like we have done many initiatives in the past. And of course, we also have a certain market power, which makes, let's say, the compliance with what active to the rest of the world as well. So just maybe to end, it's probably very tiny on your screens, but this is kind of an overview of the package from last week. We do hope that in combination or the combination of these initiatives, that by 2030, a significant part of the products that are available to EU consumers, that they are designed to be durable, energy and resource efficient, that they are increasingly repairable, recyclable. Preference is given to recycled materials instead of primary raw materials, and also that the circular business models, that they are really much more accessible and thriving. And we see that there is a strong business case. And of course, one of the issues is related to the single market as such. We are seeing that increasingly member states themselves are starting to regulate different product categories in order to avoid market distortions. Many parts of the business community have come to us and said that, well, we need harmonized rules, not a set of 27 different types of rules, which creates a very high administrative burden businesses, of course. But we do see that in addition to those, let's say, administrative saving opportunities, there are many other cost-saving opportunities for businesses too. Of course, we do see that there is an increasing scarcity of primary natural resources. When we look at those graphs that are very nicely put at the beginning of the publication, it is clear that this kind of business, let's say, doing business cannot continue. Of course, today's, let's say, geopolitical situation makes it increasingly challenging to, let's say, count on the stability of supply of raw materials. There are serious issues with price volatility. So we do see that by redesigning business models, production processes, and products themselves, by making them last longer, optimizing their use, and also having or giving businesses the opportunity to participate in a well-functioning market for secondary raw materials, that businesses do have the opportunity to significantly reduce their costs for materials, but also energy and waste management, for example. And in the end, yes, improve their resilience as well. And we also see many benefits for consumers. I mean, we hear a lot about affordability, of course. There is a lot of, let's say, work for us to do when we are going to go product by product group, because one cannot easily compare textiles with steel, with packaging, and so on. There are very different challenges and opportunities, and the impacts are also going to definitely vary. But in principle, we do see that already today's eco-design, say, directive from the energy point of view, has brought huge cost savings for consumers. If we would unlock, say, or we could unlock many more savings if we made products last longer, make them repairable, ensure that the material that goes into them is cheaper coming from secondary sources, and so on. So yes, a lot of many plans. This is only the beginning, of course. As Said also mentioned, that we still need an approval from the legislators, and only then the work will start. But this is short.
Okay, thank you very much, Elena. That was very, very comprehensive, I think. And now it's up on us to kind of unpack all the things you said and evaluate and say what is already, how they are different from the past, what are the step changes, what also in light of the contributions from the book, but also from other participants here, might be something where we might have to work a little bit more in the future. So with this, on kind of giving the floor to a critical assessment, I would invite Stefan to share his presentation. Can you?
Hello, everyone. I'm gonna start sharing. Just please tell me if it's clear to all of you, if you can hear me well and see well the slides.
Yes, we see it perfectly.
We'll make it presentation mode, and then you'll be very tiny on my screen. Would have been my pleasure to be with you. Unfortunately, I'm not based in Brussels today. So thank you very much to FEPS for inviting the European Environmental Bureau and allowing us to react to the package. Of course, for those who have explored the package, it's huge. There are not only the main text, but also the annexes, and on top of the annexes, the impact assessment called staff working document. So there, I cannot pretend I have had a deep dive in all the nitty-gritty of this very impressive work by the European Commission. Just quickly who we are. The EEB stands for European Environmental Bureau, and we gather together about 170 civil society organizations. We are present in 27 EU member states and UK and other countries, like Turkey, Serbia, or Kosovo. And we work on a wide range of issues, environmental and sustainability related. I'm leading the team on circular economy. So that's why I think it's the most important for the discussion today. And when preparing the slide, I try really to refer to what was asked in the agenda by FEPS organizers. So these are the key questions. What are the key points and aims of the measure proposed by the European Commission? Are the proposed initiatives sufficient to make circular business model the norm? Which levers and strategy are most promising, and what could be elaborated further? I will probably skip the first question because I think Elena made a great presentation of the initiative, and it's pointless for me to repeat in fewer and less precise words what she explained. So I will jump immediately to the second question. I just want to use this as an opportunity. In the slide presentation, you'll see that there is a link to our initial reaction by EB, where we kind of try to assess positive, promising, and less good points of the proposal. And so feel free to consult this whenever you have time. So jumping to the second question, and maybe before that, I'd like really to publicly thank the European Commission for the proposal. So of course, my role as a green NGO is also to maintain a critical view on the work by the EU institution. But honestly, I think this is a very, very good basis. And as we've said, I think this has the potential to be a game changer. And I will just try to address a few points today, which I think would, I would say, enable to really unleash the potential or hamper the potential of the good proposal by the European Commission. So first, are the proposed initiative sufficient to make circular business model the norm? I'm sorry, I'm very direct in my answer. So the answer is no, for different reasons. I don't think everything is in control of the European Commission with that regard. Notably, there is no proposed market incentive. And at the moment, as I think it's been discussed during the first exchange, and also several times documented, the problem of circular business model is that they compete with optimized linear business model, which have been, gaining experience, a learning curve for years. And it's not easy just to compete on the same baseline. And I think as long as there is no kind of market incentive, which have been kind of mentioned through VAT reduction by William Neal, for example, and other speakers mentioning some issue, and notably how we can support the social economy, this will not become the norm. And this is an issue because if it's not the norm, then of course the accessibility to the most vulnerable household is made more complicated. There is another element which I think is very important and that I'd like that the community in this event help us to address is being a circular business model does not mean necessarily that we are actually saving on resource, because you can have a circular business model where you give back your old phone, every 6 months. And if this phone is not repaired, but shipped in country where it will be mismanaged at end of life stage or simply destroyed and replaced, we do not necessarily see why it is very circular and saving on resource. So there is also no safeguard at the moment to ensure that new business model will actually save on resources. However, one thing which is absolutely crucial is that the proposal by the Commission to set circularity requirement for product and sustainability requirement for product already help the emergence of new business model, because they do not have to compete too much with very, sorry for this terminology, but a substandard or crappy product. So I think by raising the bar, of course, we make the possibility of a new business model, I would say, more likely. But the answer, sorry to come back to my first point, is no, it's not enough, and we still need to work on this, notably along the line I've just highlighted now. Second thing, second question was, which level and strategy are the most promising? I think, sorry, no-brainer, combination is the most promising. There is not the possibility for one type of instrument to deliver. That means that's what we've learned for long. You know, you need regulatory push. You need also market incentive and information for consumer to be able to seize the potential. And you need also to create some supportive scheme for innovative, being technological innovation or social innovation. So the combination is always required. However, if we had to make a choice, we think that in view of the success of the existing eco-design, I just want to remind that the eco-design focused on energy product today has just saved 50% of our goals of 2020 goals in terms of energy, and 1/3 of our climate goals by 2020. So this is probably the most powerful tool that the Commission has established. And by making it bigger in terms of extending the scope, by extending the dimension, I repeat my impression that this could really be a game changer. And that's why if I had to pick one among this necessary combination, it would be this new eco-design regulation. Finally, what could be elaborated further? And that's where I'd like that we have the discussion. So you see the picture, please, you know, is really this impression we have. It's very good what the proposal, well, what the Commission has put on the table, but we know there's still a long way to go. First thing, and it's been noted, we do not see any clear justification why social and due diligence criteria have been totally neglected. We may say we do not have the ability and the methodology to capture them properly today. That is recognizing a discussion, but just, you know, completely neglecting them, silencing them and pretending that the due diligence file and corporate sustainability will do the job is simply a lie. I'm sorry, we have to stand strong on this. Social criteria, due diligence are an essential part of sustainability. And on top of this, this is an essential part of the acceptability by the people. If circular economy lead to, you know, more circular product, but not being inclusive in terms of the community, in terms of youth citizenship, in terms of being accessible to most vulnerable household, it will be a failure. So that's what we absolutely call, you know, the two institutions to kind of rectify this neglectance by the EU Commission, no sustainability without social aspect. Second thing, we believe that without a clear target to drive the work, it's going to be difficult. So the Commission has set in this SPI, Sustainable Product Initiative Chapeau, the objective of doubling the circular use rate of material. So that means the total material, secondary raw material, compared to the total material used. This is good. But according to us, if we do not clearly set a resource use or more technically spoken, material footprint reduction target, we won't be able to channel the effort by the industry and other economic actors in the right direction. It just imagine if we had not set, you know, climate goals with CO2 reduction target or energy efficiency and energy saving target. I don't think that we will be in the same situation today with regard all the research, all the efforts that the EU economy has done to try to decarbonize. So we absolutely need this target. Third point, which is very important, is the fact that everything is in potential with this proposal. So everything is kind of postponed to when we will be defining, delegated act. Already, I can tell you, for those working in the eco-design committee, simply this formulation, delegated act, is very controversial because so far the member state had a voting right. And if it's delegated acts to comply with one possibility of the Lisbon Treaty, already we create a huge controversy. So just to say that, we think that what is missed in the Commission proposal is the return on experience of the current eco-design proposal, where already we've got backlogs, we've got delays. The published eco-design working plan 2022-2024 is simply, a working plan that was supposed to be delivered more than 2 years ago, okay, and has been postponed due to lack of resources, but also due to non-optimized decision-making process. And I just want to give an example. Today, there is the objective to stop the destruction of unsold goods. I mean, this is common sense. Why destroying a perfectly compliant and functional product, okay? But what the Commission says is we need to postpone this to a future delegated act. So that would mean that during the next 2 years, at least, if we are super quick, we will continue to destroy textile, electronics, which is a growing problem due to online sales, okay? So I don't understand why we do not set in this, legislation, let's set a ban on the destruction of unsold goods, even if it should happen only, for example, in 2 to 3 years, to give enough time for the industry to transit. But there is no better place than a co-decision process to decide transparently with the European Parliament on this. So why postponing it when we know it's already going to be challenging to find all the resources to deliver on all product sector? So that's, for example, one thing. The second thing is that for years, people, and not only Green NGO, have been calling for what we call a top performer approach. That means that each time you set a measure, you also set how this measure, the requirement, will evolve over time so that you provide a long-term visibility to the industry. And what we've seen over time is that, in contrary, the decision-making has been on 1 and 2 tiers rather than several tiers stage over time, providing this long-term visibility and forcing, in a way, earlier revision. So I don't want to insist too much, but I think this is absolutely crucial that people realize that the effectiveness and the potential of the Commission proposal is subordinated to a proper decision-making process and a proper staffing. And at the moment, I can tell you, as part of this eco-design community, the problem is understaffed and too lengthy decision-making process without clear deadlines. Another point which is super important is creating really a level playing field between online marketplaces and producer brick and mortar shop. It is clear that today, if you are a market online place, okay, you do not have the same liability because you are not supposed to be liable for the product you offer. And when we understand that market online sales are not producers themselves, we do not accept that they can potentially introduce non-compliant product on the market. And in the Commission proposal, even if there is some enforcement effort, notably toward the market online sale, it is not clear that this online market platform are liable and should, pay the producer responsibility fees, should be responsible in case the product they offer are not compliant. This will force them to have a more robust process to make sure that the product they offer coming from all over the world will comply with the EU rules.
Sorry, Stéphane, could you wrap up?
Yeah, that's finished for me. So two other points I want to say is we regret that the construction product regulation is not fully aligned with the eco-design and does not grant a digital product passport. Just to say, you know, a construction product is about 50% of the material we place on your market. Why don't we have exactly the same type of transparent process? It is not clear if standardization route would be the main vehicle for construction product or delegated acts. And finally, in the consumer empowering file, we regret that there is no clear prohibition of planned obsolescence. The Commission say we want to help consumer and fight against this, but for example, in France, where I stay, there is a clear article saying it is sanctioned. So it's prohibited, and if there is a case made to the court, then the responsible actors should be sanctioned and penalized. Thank you very much for your attention, and happy to discuss now.
Okay, thank you very much. That was very detailed and touches a lot of issues that we might come back to later in the discussion. Now, as one of our authors from the book, I want to give the floor to Ilaria to also reflect on what has been discussed here in the proposal based on your research findings and what you can contribute to the discussion here.
Okay, thank you, Andreas. Thank you for having me here. Okay, so when I read the European Commission's new proposal for circular economy, I clearly saw some limits, as already explained by the previous panel and Monsieur Arditi. But I would like to, from my perspective, focusing a little bit more on what is promising, and at the same time also try to see what has not been explained as for now, for the moment. So what I see as most promise in the proposals is that the European Commission has actually grasped the circular economy holistic aspect already in the practice in how it has drafted the communication. So as I wrote in the chapter of the book we are presenting today, a brief definition of circular economy, it's a socio-economic model that overturns the linear economic paradigm that has accompanied the development of capitalism since the Industrial Revolution by envisaging closing the circle, bringing materials considered waste back into the production cycle. But besides that, I see the circular economy as a complex and holistic model that involves rethinking the use of resources at every point in the chain. So the material becomes renewable, leading to the virtual disappearance of waste. Waste from one production chain becomes input for another, or closed loop production chains that are maintained. So, an end-of-life element is reintegrated as a new secondary raw material to restart production, and products and supply chains are designed using systemic thinking, including environmental, social, and cultural components and constraints. So a design, as we saw, that can be adapted to possible shocks, so economic, environmental, as you mentioned, a pandemic or war. Always has to consist of a plan B, and it has to work over medium, long, very long periods. So and again, it's a socio-economic model. So if we do not consider the human factor, as already mentioned before, the quality of life and work, the circular economy, then it will fail in its mission. So I think that of course, at the same time, we cannot apply circular economy indiscriminately and universally. It cannot be considered a panacea for every systemic distortion, nor the inevitable degradation of all matter be made to disappear in a perpetual recycling process. But I see the proposal presented by the European Commission as a positive sign of getting away from the rhetoric of the single answer or the self-fixed solution, and started to cross-fertilize our policies, engaging in the painstaking and prudent work of reinvention and experimentation, and learning to live with uncertainty. So, for example, in the passage from the proposals, they clearly state we allow for a multi-pronged approach to product regulation, a real game changer whose momentum will build over time. By setting a comprehensive cross-sectoral framework and taking key steps, such as adopting working plans, the general direction and objective will be clear well in advance. So there are also connection with, of course, the Green Deal and also with the UN 2030 Sustainable Development Goals. Sorry, so it's clearly what already Monsieur Aditi mentioned about the most promising thing about the combining factor. So two other focuses that for me as a geographer and environmental communication researcher, I consider fundamental in this package are the global dimension and the communication and consciousness raising of people when the text calls consumers, and I would like to stop using that word because it's already something that goes against the whole idea we are talking about. So not only does Europe pursue its advocacy for sustainability worldwide, but is committed to stepping up its engagement with non-EU countries at global, regional, and bilateral levels. Supporting the sustainability transition and facilitating compliance with the new rules, especially with low and middle income countries. Also, yeah, a lot of, I don't mention all the proposals now because you already explained, but wait. I wanted to mention also that this commitment to work with non-EU countries, I think it's also explicitly connected to the textile pack. And I will not dig too much into it now, but as we know, a lot of clothes from Europe end up in African and Asian landfills. So, and that's connect with what Mr. Bacchus was saying before about the dirty jobs. I think it's a point we have to take into consideration too. And the other crucial aspect is that we have to change, we have to have a cultural change, of course. Regarding the empowering and protecting consumers chapter, so there are a lot of interesting proposals, not very well defined, but still I think it's very important and promising, especially for the greenwashing problem. So, of course, the process has only just begun, and much will depend on how all these proposals will be translated into practice. So we hope that the co-legislative bodies will be able to find the necessary agreements to translate the proposals into binding targets with the greatest possible impact. Another element I would like to take into consideration is connected, talking about consumers, is about the widespread skepticism toward European and sometimes national institutions by a growing part of the European citizens, of course, pushed by some populist parties or online propaganda and a lot of things, but we'll not discuss this in this moment. So this can be a critical aspect to me. And also, if we think that there's this trend in activist entrepreneurship, which has led a lot of consumers and a lot of people to believe more in companies, in what companies say about their products, instead of actually have a critical thinking or trusting national or European institutions or scientific institution, you know. So this aspect I would like to see how it will be hold. Sorry. And finally, I would like to say something about the different situation in different parts of Europe. Of course, for example, about the packaging recycling rates. In Italy, which is the context I know more, we have a high recycling rate, which is 73% as a national average. But at the same time, in Sicily, and specifically in two of the most populous cities, Catania and Palermo, the recycling rates are still 11% and something and 19%. So this is just one example. Of course, this is not all about waste is not all about circular economy, but I think there are several reasons for this, also connected with organized crime working with legal waste management. So I think that we have to consider really different situations in every part of Europe. And this is a more social aspect that, of course, cannot be stated clearly in a proposal like that, but giving the attention to this is, I think it's important. And that's it, but I think the proposals are really promising, and I think that you made great work.
Okay, thank you very much. I mean, also very interesting intervention. I think I take from you that kind of this broad conceptual thing, that the proposals might actually lead into some different sort of economy that might be distinct from the model of, you said, well, let's call it by the name, capitalism, that we have known for last couple of decades, or in this very specific historical configuration. And also the whole uncertainty discussion, I think, is very interesting in the sense that we have many proposals because we do not know yet. We might know that eco-design in the past was a very strong driver of, say, decarbonizing and getting down our energy use, but for the next steps, we also might have to embrace multiple routes, as you do in the proposal, to figure out which one works best. So now, finally, I have the honor to give the word to Yanis Briska, who is one of the editors of the book, and who, I guess, having read so much from all of the authors in the book, will also be able to give a really good assessment of where the circular economy stands right now in Europe. Please, Yanis.
Yes, thanks a lot. I hope you hear me well. Andreas already introduced me, so I don't have to do that. I want to also use this opportunity to thank all the authors who worked on this publication for the almost a year. I think we have been working on this to publish. I don't have a presentation, but I just put down some notes listening to the speakers of today's panels, and specifically focusing on the second panel, where we are discussing the European Commission proposals for the circular economy. And I think, I really see this progress already from several decades ago when we started in Europe to discuss the product policies, and now we are talking about the circular economy. So we are moving from the products to the policy, and I think that's good progress, even if we always want to be much faster and quicker in results. But I still think it's a right direction where we are heading to. Specifically appreciate the policy initiative on greenwashing, against the greenwashing and obsolescence questions. Now with EU taxonomy, I really see that businesses are really aiming for green. So they are looking for the ways how they would show their supply chains, the consumers, the governments that they are sustainable, environmentally sustainable. And I think it's very important to have clear guidelines on what the sustainability, environmental sustainability means. And in our case, in terms of material use and waste, so greenwashing regulations on avoiding the greenwashing and avoiding obsolescence, I think, is very important at this stage, specifically at this stage when there is such a great push for businesses and products to become green. But as Stefan already mentioned, we are missing clear regulations on avoiding planned obsolescence, and I guess that's something where the governments, like France, for example, can step in and introduce their own policies to deal with these issues if it's not regulated on a European level. At the same time, I understand also that we have to really go beyond products and information. Products alone and communication alone is not going to move us into the circular economy and dematerialization of economy. So that's usually not enough to really change the consumption and production patterns, and as it was just mentioned, to change our economic system. So if we are really aiming for moving into the circular economy, we have to look beyond and think of changing support structures, including social structures, physical, institutional structures, which are supporting current business models, current material consumption models, current waste flow models, and try to build this new systems, new structures which are in line with circular economy ideas and actions. I'm working also as a researcher at University of Latvia. We've been doing many sociological studies, interviewing people and businesses, and trying to understand what are the drivers for behavioral aspects of environment, like pro-environmental activities. And we can see very big value action gap on what people know, what they want to do, and what they are actually doing. So that's again, I would just want to stress this necessity for going beyond information, because most of the people know the right choices. They know what they have to, what is expected from them socially and culturally. But it's not always the easiest way how to behave. There are social practices which are strongly embedded in our cultures and in our everyday lives, which are not so easy to change. So again, coming back to the same point about the structural changes which are necessary to support this kind of cultural change in society. It was also mentioned several times, and I would strongly agree with that, for circular economy, we cannot really find kind of silver bullet which would solve all the problems. We cannot imagine one policy intervention or some kind of tax or something else which would totally change direction we are going. So we have to work with this integrated approach of mix of policy interventions. Also on different levels. I think the national and local municipal levels are very important, as they are much closer to the businesses and people. So for many of us, I think it's very important to channel this EU level policies to be implemented on a national level, and even more importantly on a local municipal level, which is in many cases not very easy, even maybe even harder than to have agreement on the European level. And just one last point which I wanted to mention is that I see many parallels here with the energy transition, and some of the speakers already have mentioned that. And so in energy transition, we are talking about decarbonization, energy decrease, consumption decrease in energy use, and now with the war in Ukraine and European dependency on fossil fuels from Russia, more and more initiatives are coming up to decrease our energy consumption. But what is more important, even, I think, rethink how much energy we actually need, and maybe we can come up with different initiatives how we can actually decrease the energy consumption. And I think also for circular economy, it's not just enough to recycle and reuse products. We also have to look on material throughput through the economy, how much materials we are actually using, and try to dematerialize our economies, so decrease the economic resource consumption, which is I think it's much harder question, much harder task to do than just improving the efficiency and increasing the recycling rates, because then decreasing material consumption also goes in conflict in some ways with our aims for economic development and resource extraction. But in the first panel, we already heard that as many of the extracting industries are also have a lot of social issues. So I think it goes hand in hand here. And just one last point is that energy transition in many ways means increasing extraction of different rare materials which are necessary for keeping our energy transition goals. So here I think again we have to align the circular economy aims and activities with the energy transition activities, which then would mean that we are also much more sensitive in how much material resources we are consuming and using in our energy transition. Yeah, these were some of the points which I noted down through listening to today's presentations, and thank you very much. And if you have any questions.
Yeah, thank you very much, Yanis. So I think as this was also a little bit meant, I guess, or many of you reacted to the proposals from the Commission. I think it might be good to also give Helena some space to also share your thoughts on the reactions. But perhaps one question that I wanted to ask you also is, how do you see the kind of interplay between the digital and the sustainability transition here? So there's of course the digital product passport, but if I read the proposal correctly, it's not yet clear who will own this data. What are the kind of, there's a political decision to be made between kind of the old framework of safeguarding intellectual property and all the security concerns related to data governance, but then there is also the overriding priority perhaps of the circular economy and the dematerialization of our economies. So I would be also very keen to hear if you have any thoughts on those kind of, can those things be reconciled, those interests or those kind of pieces of legislation and initiatives, and if so, how?
Thank you very much indeed. As you mentioned, the details of the passport itself will will still need to be worked out, but overall, of course, the digital and green transitions, and be it in the energy transition or the transition to the circular economy, they are what we call twin transitions and mutually helpful to each other. And one is, of course, let's say, sharing the information, the digital product passport that you mentioned, which can be, well, very helpful not only to consumers but also to enforcement authorities for checking compliance of products, but also to businesses seeing what kind of substance an X product contains in order to be able to bring that material later back to the loop and so on. But this is only let's say one element of the two transitions moving together, because there is also, I mean, if we look at the design phase, there is a lot that digital technologies and digital innovation can do for circular economy. Well, actually, in every part of the supply chain, basically. Of course, when we go, recycling was mentioned many times. All the digital technologies that can be used there, the traceability, the tracking, so on and so forth. So we see really huge potential here. I mean, circular business models, we have discussed those a lot. Of course, again, the digital world is key for making that happen when we talk about product as a service, when we talk about sharing economy, all that. So this is a very important question, and it is why we call them, let's say, twin transitions, is precisely that one should support and help the other move forward, basically. And it's well, the same for all the strands of the Green Deal, but in the circular economy context, we definitely see huge.
Okay, thank you very much. Do you have any other reactions to what the discussants said?
Yes, well, it was, thank you very much. There were so many different comments and topics raised that I'm not sure that I will manage to cover all of them, but maybe just to start with a couple. There was a mentioning that that these proposals will not enable the circular business models to become a norm. Maybe it's just very important to emphasize that we are fully aware of that, and the promise was never to make sustainable business models the norm. The promise is to make sustainable products the norm. And we do recognize that the business model side, it's extremely important for the reasons that all the other speakers mentioned. However, when it comes to the tools in the hands, let's say, of the European Union, it's more complex, because here the taxation, for example, that was also mentioned, plays a very important role, but where, well, let's say, the hands of the Commission are a bit tight for the procedural reasons. We, well, are not very successful at pushing through, let's say, taxation measures at the EU level due to unanimity. So there are several, let's say, obstacles which make it a bit more complex for us to push via regulatory means circular business models. But at the same time, I mean, we do recognize that, and we do feel that there are different tools we nevertheless can use, which we also outlined then in the proposal. So bringing people together, trying to define, map what actually the obstacles are today. We are also, for example, in the textile strategy, sending a clear message to member states that we do encourage them to create favorable taxation regimes for be it the reuse or repair sectors, for example, there, but also other circular business models. The convening, let's say, power that we have, that can be helpful, even if the regulatory, let's say, power here is more difficult to use, at least at this stage. But we do believe that, I mean, also for the circular business models to really function, we need a fundamental change in our products as well. If our products fall apart very quickly, if after 3 washes a t-shirt cannot be used, or there is planned obsolescence and so on, then it's also very difficult to ensure, I don't know, a product as a service for those kind of products. So these things go together, and we believe that if we are successful in delivering on the promises, or let's say the proposals that we have put on the table, this is a very important step for making also the sustainable business models the norm, next to products, sustainable products themselves the norm. Maybe another point that I was thinking of mentioning a bit, it was also asked already during the previous panel, it regards the social side and why the due diligence, the social due diligence is not part of the proposals. I think we have to be quite careful at not turning, let's say, the sustainable product regulation into an everything, which then in the end takes so much time that it delivers nothing. I mean, today's, let's say, the eco-design directive, why it has also been so successful is that it is pretty concrete. It has a concrete focus. We have tried, of course, to now enlarge, let's say, the framework to as many products as possible and significantly broaden also the scope of the elements that can be regulated under it. But we do have to ask ourselves whether this is really the best tool for regulating also the social side of things. And we, after our assessment, did not conclude that way. And it is also, I mean, if we think about the architecture of the future framework, if we are regulating via delegated acts, for example, every time we have a separate impact assessment where we define also together, well, in a process that you have seen that continues similar to the current eco-design, what exactly it has to entail. I mean, it doesn't really make sense that we end up in a situation where for a certain textiles product category, you have social due diligence side norms for certain electronics you don't, and so on and so forth. There is, I mean, for the current commission, the social dimension of sustainability and the due diligence is of really high importance. But I would caution, and this was also the result of our assessment, of putting everything in the same basket, because we cannot have at the same time very quick results, but broaden it even further. And yes, I mean, then we can really end up with very, very significant delays in actually achieving anything. So this is really about, namely, the environmental sustainability of products throughout their value chain. Basically, this is the conclusion. And maybe lastly, I just wanted to mention also one point on the last points that were made with regard to the energy transition, and that I mean, couldn't agree more with all the points that were made. This is precisely also the logic of the European Green Deal. We have, let's say, the energy transition, which is linked also to the circular economy transition. We know perfectly well that just changing, let's say, or shifting to renewables, but continuing with the consumption and production patterns that we have today, that we have solved the issue and, for example, well, stopped climate change. And well, not to even mention the biodiversity loss here. So they have to go hand in hand, and that is why we believe that, well, already the product policy, if we manage, I mean, very concretely, one is the reduction of energy consumption, but the other is also, if you make a product repairable or durable, it immediately means that maybe you need one less, which means that you have saved all the resources, all the energy that you need for the production of a new one, basically. If we manage to create a very well-functioning European market for recycled content and use that as much as possible instead of primary raw materials, fossil-based or bio-based, both in the big quantities are problematic, then we have actually addressed also those issues. So very important points, but just to underline that was one set of proposals cannot tackle everything together, but that is the holistic nature of it. It all moves basically to the direction that was precisely underlined. So at the end.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we're almost out of time, but since it's just a wrap up that comes afterwards, I think we can go for one or two more interventions, either by the speakers or a pressing question from the audience. Do I see something from the audience? You are yes, please.
So my question is for My question is for Helena. Could you explain a bit more about why the Commission didn't try to do more when it comes to planned obsolescence? Because it seems like a no-brainer to so many citizens. I'd rather have to save up to buy a fridge than be able to buy a fridge every 3 months, but have it break every 2-3 years. And yeah, why wasn't there more of a push on that front?
Thank you very much. I would kind of, let's say, disagree a bit that there is no focus in the package on that. First of all, there are very clear legislative provisions proposed in the proposal for consumer empowerment for the green transition, which is basically, well, through the information requirements that the company, when you go and buy a product, or when I go and buy, if there are any kind of, let's say, elements that could affect the functionality of that product, I need to be informed of it. So for example, the software updates which could limit the, well, the usage period of a product. So these are very clear provisions that we have introduced, which did not exist previously, and which are kind of an indirect ban on those kind of practices, or at least should push the companies quite strongly, towards stopping those. But the other issue when it comes to the sustainable product policy, or the eco-design for sustainable products regulation itself, is that we also, we considered the straightforward ban to put it in the regulation itself. The same goes for the destruction of unsold consumer goods. But when we then actually looked at the evidence in our hands and how different it is for different products, the destruction of textiles or the obsolescence, it doesn't apply to all product categories. It was decided that yes, it would make, in the context of this proposal, more sense to put those provisions of bans directly in the, let's say, delegated acts that we would propose for different product groups. So this was the consideration in the context of specific proposal. However, I would just invite also to look a bit more into the consumer empowerment for the green transition and the part how that covers the planned obsolescence that hopefully will make, well, already have quite a positive effect in shorter term. This is a bit.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there any final words? Ilaria, Yanis, Stefan?
Yeah, well, maybe if I've got the final word, can you hear me well? Okay, thank you, Elena. I must say, being engaged in this eco-design community since 2009, I'm not convinced that we can just say we don't want to consider social criteria because it's going to be too complicated. Because I think what we've done is product by product, we've always assessed what are the most significant dimensions. And if for one product, the most significant dimension is the social impact, you know, it has on community within or outside you, I do not see why we should not address this concern. So my understanding is that there has been a kind of dilemma within the European Commission service, but all along, you know, the consultation process, it was very clear that social criteria were to be one way or another addressed through the policy. So for this community, notably FEPS, working on, you know, also with trade union and paying attention to social criteria, I just call you not to bend into this easy argument that it would have been too complicated. Anyway, it's complicated, but neglecting completely a dimension such as the social criteria might be endangering the whole acceptability and performance of the good legislation put by the Commission on the table now. Thank you.
Allow me, I'm just compelled to reply to that because working for Mr. Timmermans to whom the just transition element of the entire Green Deal is absolutely fundamental. I cannot, let's say, agree with the argument that we have neglected something. I mean, for every single also impact assessment and the category of products that would be regulated under this regulation, of course, the social considerations would also be fundamental. The key question is whether this regulation as an instrument is the best vehicle to address the social concerns. And this is the question. It is not the question whether the social concerns are equally important. Of course they are. And this is the fundamental, let's say, the premise, the heart of the green transition, that unless it's just, unless the social elements are fully considered, we will not succeed in any case. So this is, I really find it's extremely important to emphasize that. But the question is whether, yes, the instrument as such is the best one for regulating product by product, on the product by product basis, also the social elements. Of course, as was also mentioned at the beginning, the debate will continue at the level of Council and the Parliament. Different options are still possible, but our assessment in the end showed that it would not necessarily be the best vehicle for that. And this is also not the case in today's eco-design framework on which we promised to build. So just to underline that, of course, we are absolutely not neglecting, wanting to neglect the huge importance of social dimension, this transition, and every other, let's say, pillar of the Green Deal. But the core question is, yes, whether the sector specific, product specific legislation, the same be for the
Thank you, Elena.
or other elements. So
I just want to say that my point was, can we link with digital product passport? If transparency is to be established through the due diligence and corporate sustainability file, it would have been easy for you to say, and this would be reflected in the digital product passport, because this would be unavailable information. So the problem we see is that what we call the passing the buck syndrome. So that is, when you set the eco-design, you say, oh, no, another piece of legislation will deal with social criteria. And then when you deal with this other file, then they say, oh, but it's product related, it should be done by eco-design. We've experienced that for years between waste and product policy, until at least it was set a circular economy action plan trying to link the two. We don't want to lose another decade or two before linking with social criteria. So I think there are ways for you to make the best out of the two files, but making sure that it's not neglected. And this lack of assurance, despite the engagement of Mr. Timmermans and the team around fair transition, that is today missing. And I just thank you for addressing this the best way you feel, but not leaving it in the limbo. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Helena, is there a last response? Because otherwise I will wrap up. I will also reflect a little bit on this, but yeah.
Oh, thank you. Just to mention that what we also say clearly in the communication is, because yes, the question was now also connected a bit to digital product passport. A digital product passport will not be necessarily limited only to the elements that come from the regulation itself, and we actually hope that the tool as such will be used for more purposes. We will see also when developing other pieces of legislation whether, yes, those interlinkages can be made, but we already encourage and hope that it will be picked up not only for the products that will not be regulated under the regulation itself, but also for other, let's say, elements. So in that sense, I think it's a very valuable.
Okay, then thank you very much. I'm going to just take 5 minutes to try to reflect on all the important discussions that we had. And I think especially the last exchange has shown to us that it's not yet solved. I mean, it's a big issue. It's a complex and wicked issue. We're addressing it. Oh, sorry. With a variety of instruments, and the alignment of those is crucial. There needs to be a little bit of experimentation, but also sometimes it can be comfortable to just say, well, I need to stay on target, but then you have unintended consequences. So this is, I guess, the card we are dealt with and the game we are playing. And here, perhaps as a couple of reflections from my side, I think it's interesting to see that the choice of instruments that we use to govern the circular economy is in a sense also very path dependent. On the one hand side, we've moved out from, okay, it's only recycling, it's only waste, but to already the kind of upstream decision to look into eco-design. But now the kind of, say, way to do it is still oftentimes, if I understand the directives correctly, which of course has to do with the institutional setup of the EU, but it's going to be labels, it's going to be standards, and to a certain extent, it's going to be kind of hard law prohibitions. But if we look at, for example, what's happening in the book, a lot of people also reflected on the fact that investment programs and kind of showcasing can oftentimes be a much more significant lever of change once a certain ecosystem of producers or kinds of businesses is already developed, as we see, for example, in the social economy. What would it not be a possibility to just try to amplify here? That could be is one reflection that I had. The other reflection that comes from the discussion of carbon prices, for example, that some studies say that, okay, the carbon price, the market signal, if we talk about taxes, which are those very blunt instruments, are actually not the ones that gave us those 88% cost reduction solar energy, but it was really a very targeted, mission-oriented nurturing of an ecosystem of suppliers. So why do I say this? Basically, I say this because we've had the recovery discussion last week here, and we are also, I kind of try to link this to a bigger discussion about EU politics, where we now see also the EU becoming, exploring different instruments in its pandemic response to create actually sustainable and digital transition. So perhaps that might be a reflection that I had. The other question I had is, or what I wanted to reflect here is a little bit the question of what to target. We saw that that it's a very complex project. We have very complex supply chains. We have hundreds of products that need to be governed. But then the question is, we also heard that 50% of basically materials are in buildings, and say consumables, I think on a global level, it's something like 7 gigatons, whereas buildings are 40. And there you have the materials locked in for decades. So then you have the whole question of what kind of materials do you have for which purpose? Are they kind of hazardous substances? Are they plastics? All those questions are kind of interesting for me because I think it might be interesting to look at not the big list of all products that exist or just go to the individual sectors, but really, as also was said with regards to the kind of social implications of each of the products, what is the most significant driver here, and do some sort of weighting, to assign some sort of weights to what needs to be addressed here, what are the key questions. So, and I guess data is something that will make this easier, where we again then cross with the digital transition. But on the other hand, we also at the moment don't have a scarcity of data. We have an abundance of data and oftentimes low quality data. So you can go to many providers that will tell you that they have a data set or can easily construct it on any product you want. And you just need to then find out which is the right one and do some standards. But it's also a political decision on what to focus. So my kind of final reflection would be learning perhaps also a little bit from what we've seen in the space of sustainable finance with the taxonomy, but also with the private data providers, that there is a space for politics and there is a space for reflecting the things we discussed today, especially the social dimension, when actually determining which policy instrument we need to use. And of course, we can build up on what has been there, but in some cases, we might have to also go to the drawing board to address these complex questions, and also to basically be critical and attentive of, does this data sources we use, does this regulation or policy instrument we use actually get us closer to the state where we want to go? And I guess the state here that we have heard oftentimes today is clear. It needs to be a reduction of material throughput and needs to be done in a socially just manner. So I think this is kind of summarizing what I've learned today, or what I would like to give you on the way as a means of reflection, also from reading all the chapters in the very excellent book that, if I represented it correctly, also really had a very, very holistic systemic view that reflected all the different dimensions. I mean, you said, what is a circular economy? We still are in the way of finding out, and we need, once we are finding out how it is governed, we actually will be given the definition by ourselves, by our political action. So with this, I would like to wish you a very good evening. Thanks a lot, both online and in-person participants, to have come here to FEPS. On behalf of FEPS, I would like to thank you very much again for all your interventions and your time. And yeah, thanks a lot, and hope to see you again in a different format. Goodbye.